Welcome to the Mullet Gang.
A neurospicy podcast for neurodivergent folks.
We bring the spicy to neurospicy.
We want you to know that you are not alone and you are not too much.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, y'all. We have quite the episode for you today. We will be discussing ADHD, love, relationships, marriage, and all things related to love.
Yes, all the things. And I think this is a really hot topic, right? ADHD often comes up when we're discussing relationships because there's so many different factors in how we show up in relationships and our needs and communication challenges. So our last episode, we talked about friendship, right?
Mhm.
And how that shows up, our strengths, the weaknesses. So for this episode, we're going to talk about romance and love and dating and spiciness, right?
Yes, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Absolutely.
So let's start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning earlier about like how you can even think back to like your days in elementary school, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I always felt things very intensely from a young age, and that includes feelings of love and crushing. Like in kindergarten, having a little crush on the boy next to me that would nap right next to me on his little nap mat, and just having these like really intense crushes
Mhm.
at an early age and becoming almost like hyper fixated
Mhm.
on boys. And I know a lot of girls are boy crazy, but I was really boy crazy and
Same.
would fall into like daydreaming and like fantasy land about my crushes.
Yeah, like almost like, I remember being like kindergarten and like playing Little Mermaid and like I wanted to find my real Prince Eric.
Yes.
Because that Prince Eric and I were going to grow up and get married for real.
That fantasy, right? Like of wanting to be the princess and wanting our prince and wanting that attention and companionship. I think that starts at a very early age.
Yeah.
Especially as you hit puberty and hormones start to develop, that can really explode.
Yeah, I think all my life I've been chasing that male gaze, like trying to get his attention, trying to get that guy. And I think you fantasize about what, like, for me, I was fantasizing about like what love looked like. And I mean, this might not be relatable to our younger generations today, which I commend them for that. But I think for anyone Gen X, millennial, I think a lot of us, millennial and up, kind of can all relate to like having to find love, and having to find the one and having to find that in fucking high school.
Oh gosh.
Um,
Yes. And I think it goes back to that deep-seated need to feel validated, to feel accepted, to feel worthy. And for a lot of us, we would equate feeling valued and worthy to having a relationship or having a male's attention, right?
right. I mean, I even think like we even talked about like how, as young girls, like if we were in a friendship, it was like fucking intense.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like our first relationships,
Mm-hmm.
but in a girl friendship model. So that girlhood, like I had like my one best friend and we did everything together and everybody else was just like in the picture, but they weren't in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I know you also had like that one best friend that you grew up with like super tight.
Yeah, we met in first grade. I'll never forget. She asked me if I had a hot pink crayon, and we bonded over that, and we were inseparable for all of elementary school, middle school, and even high school. We remained close. So yeah, I think just in general, like when we find someone that we connect with, we vibe with, we really can get attached very quickly, but also very intensely, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it almost became like a little marriage, I think, for you guys. Because like I know when I met you, you guys had a little fallen out.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I walked by her, like in high school in the halls, she would give me the stink eye. I think she was like, there's my ex's new girlfriend.
The new girls in town.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think that even relates to dating, right? Like both you and I can relate to having very intense, serious relationships in high school and having things develop very quickly, right? Like I always kind of laugh when I think back on high school. Like I had two very serious, committed long-term relationships. And the first one started when I was only 13, so looking back now and thinking about how young I was and naive to think that it was such an intense thing, it's like mind-blowing.
That is fucking mind blowing, actually. Because as we're doing this research again, we fall deeper into the research
Mm-hmm.
and everything starts to make sense, like that is making sense to me now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the emotion is so strong. Our wanting to be in love is so strong because
Mm-hmm.
we have that rejection
Oh,
sensitivity. And so, like,
yes.
we're trying to find Mr. Right all the time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
was thinking about like just how much I maybe could have done differently. And I know we always say, like, don't think about that too much because it's already happened. But if I didn't just like want to be in love all the time in high school and even in middle school, what would that path look like? And
Mm-hmm.
why was that something that was it because we were girls? Like, was that
Mm.
the reason why?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's okay to get curious and just think about that. How would things have been differently? But just like that need to be in that companionship or to have someone or to be in a relationship, there was so much fear of being single or being alone that I think we always try to avoid that. Or if we did have a breakup, it's like, okay, who's next? Who's my next Prince Charming? Right.
Yeah, I mean, our generation too, like watching Beverly Hills 90210.
Mm,
Girl,
yeah.
Saved by the Bell even. Like there was
Hmm.
always that one couple that like stay together and like they're the main character energy. And
Yes.
okay, like this might sound a little bit self-deprecating, but I don't think so. It's self-reflection. I kind of feel like having ADHD for some of us is like having like main character energy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Like I always feel like everything's happening to me only, and
Hmm.
I'm the one really going through it. And I think that that was the thing that like I was looking for in my relationships in school was that main character energy, boyfriend, girlfriend, main
Hmm.
character energy,
Hmm.
best friend, And so just what could have that been like if that wasn't the focus or if I knew how to treat the ADHD that comes up, right?
Wow, I think that's really interesting. It's almost like the relationship fills that void or becomes like a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Like I look back and I had a lot of insecurities, and we often talk about feeling like we're too much or we're awkward or we don't fit in or no one gets us. So this idea of being in a relationship, it's like this is my validation. See, like someone does love me. See, I'm not too much. See, I am worthy. But without that, all that stuff comes back, right?
Right. It's hard to be alone, or it's hard not to be in the circle, or it's hard not to be, part of that friend group. Like, I think I did kind of want to be like in a clique, but I also knew that like that wasn't for me.
Mm.
Like, I still wanted and craved more of a one-to-one friendship because I felt like that bond was going to be like way stronger than a group bond, right?
Yes.
But I think that's kind of like if you can look at the good of being in a relationship with somebody with ADHD is that they'll fucking love you so hard and
Hmm.
they'll be like, they'll have your back.
Oh yeah, and they'll think about you every second of the day, right? Like I told Chris, do you know how many times I think about you all throughout the day? If you're happy, if you're hungry, if you've had time to have your lunch or work out, and I can't wait to see you when you get home. Like when we are committed and invested, we are all in, right? And
Yeah.
that's 21 years later, and I still
I
feel that
know.
way.
I know. I think it's so cool, like that you guys have been committed that long and that you've really like learned to like grow with each other and that he's been on this path with you with ADHD. And I think that, you know, he's been so supportive about it because I think like back into like my first really serious relationship after high school, if I would have told that ex about this whole ADHD thing, I don't think he would have believed it. I don't think he would have cared.
Mm-mm.
I think he would have told me like I was just using it as an excuse, which I know a lot of us hear that all the time.
Hmm.
I think he would have somehow dismissed it and probably gaslight me into thinking that this was like attention seeking, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And probably would
But
have not felt safe, right?
no, but how could you even work on yourself if somebody's telling you all that stuff? Like,
Hmm.
oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I think having the support in a relationship and having that person that's like, I'm going to take this walk with you. Like, you're learning about yourself right now. Let's do it together. Let's walk into this together.
Hmm.
Because if you have anyone in your life not supporting you and saying, like, yeah, I'm confirming that, what you feel is right and this diagnosis is real for you, like,
Hmm.
if you don't have that, then I can't see how a relationship could really stand that test of time.
No, no, not at all. I mean, it's such a big part of every relationship and every communication, every interaction. If you're not acknowledging it and your partner doesn't understand, then it's going to create so much conflict. And even thinking about our early dating experiences, we weren't even aware that this thing was going on and how it was influencing us, right? And how it played
No,
out.
no, I can honestly say that like I was in a really toxic relationship, and I think that the ADHD definitely amplified very toxic traits, not
Hmm.
just for him, but for me. Like I definitely could not handle the emotional dysregulation. And
Mm.
my coping mechanisms were really dark. You know, I was in a really dark place in my first relationship where I lived with somebody and like we were getting to that point of marriage. But it didn't happen because like I don't know. I mean, of course, things happen for a reason, but there was also a lot of ADHD happening at that time. And I had no therapy, I had no coping skills. I didn't know really that there could be something like that happening.
Mm.
Everything just felt so real. And I was just in a place where I didn't know how to save myself, forgive myself, have that, you know, clarity of worthiness.
Hmm.
um, so I just, you know, I really sometimes just hope that whenever we like talk about this shit, that there's someone like young listening that like is feeling this way and is like, this is so relatable. Like I should look into this.
Yes. Well, and I feel like you just put it all together in my brain. So we talked about this early desire for attention, companionship, love, to feel worthy and valid. Like we have this deep desire. And so then when we get that, we hold on so intensely that I think we put blinders on and we don't see that toxic
Mhm.
behavior, those red flags, like, or we just continue to tolerate it because we're so scared of not having that anymore. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Breaking up with somebody is really fucking hard to do when
Oh,
you don't
gosh.
have all that shit together. You're right. Like I think it took me a really long time to walk away from this, you know, and it was to the breaking point. Like I had to be at a breaking point. But I've held on to friendships. I've held on to closeness that I didn't need
Mm.
only because the ADHD, I think, kept me in that spot, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
The fear of being alone, the fear of a relationship not working out, the fear of being rejected, right? Like all that stuff. Like just the fear of having to deal with the emotional like baggage of a breakup, right? Or
yeah.
the transition or
Yeah.
being on your own. Like I think all of that can dilute like our actual perception of what's happening.
Yeah. And I think too, like, even if you're so fucking unhappy, like you're still gonna miss that person.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss the routine, you're gonna miss the comforts, you're gonna miss just knowing that person. But I think I don't know. I really don't have the answer yet, but I know that the more I grow and the more I've experienced, the more I'm able to help myself out of the situation. And I'm not anymore really finding like that one person to save me. Because I think that's another part of it too. Even from, you know, kindergarten, I had to look for a prince,
Mm-hmm.
not a troll. You know what I mean?
We got plenty of that.
Like happy little worker that just does his job and it's fine. No, it has to be the fucking prince.
Oh yeah.
Right. And like
Mm-hmm.
even that archetype could have so many qualities and traits that are toxic.
Mm-hmm. Oh
But
yeah.
I'm looking for that savior,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And actually, side note, the reason why the hair hero is like my nickname is because I had to do this like codependency breakup unattached class. And in it, we talked about um you know, enmeshment, and we talked about like how to embark on this like journey. And we grabbed a lot of inspiration from that hero's journey story, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I thought, hero, I could be my own hero. I could be a hair hero because I could save people from having bad hair,
Oh my
but
God,
I
I
can also
love it.
help people, you know. And that's actually how I got that name. So it's
How have I never heard this story before? Like I'm moved to tears and I don't even know this.
it's cheesy a little.
It's so cute.
A little cheesy. Amy, like you, it's so weird. I feel like I lived this like weird life of like Cirque du Soleil, like hippie shit, where I like had this like discovery, and still, even with my self discovery, I didn't know anything about ADHD. Even in high school, my senior year, I'm in all these relationships. You think they said, "Hey, you have ADHD," So your relationships are going to be fucking messy. No, they're just like study harder, like just try to put more attention to school.
Oh gosh. And I think that's the biggest stigmas out there,
Right.
right? Like people look at ADHD and they think, oh, it's just difficulty in school or focus or, getting things done. And I personally had no idea that there was such an emotional component
Mhm.
that it impacted relationships and communication. I had no idea.
No, I had no idea that it made me a shitty girlfriend sometimes.
Yeah, I would have my little like outbursts, my irritable moments. I was always like sensory, like upset and complaining. And now it makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Like we were just talking about like, are we get to the concert early girl or are we like, let's be a little late so that we're comfortable?
Yeah.
I mean, like this whole time I thought I was just a nag. No, I have sensory issues. I don't like to be wet.
No.
If I'm going to a concert, I'm not waiting outside in the line while the rain comes down in Florida to be wet, to be early to a show that who cares about being early to? Like, let me just live and be comfortable and not ruin my makeup and get to the show a little late.
Yes. And I think that's the importance of having a partner that gets you and gets your ADHD, because I think we both shared that we are in relationships where we were someone that just was kind of on the opposite end of
Yep.
things, that wanted to be there at a certain time and have things a certain way and have a lot of order and rigidity. And that really kind of irks us to our core because that's the
Right.
opposite of how we feel.
And
Right.
guess what happens after that? There's an argument
Yep.
and a fight.
Mhm.
And you're left with like, why am I like this? It's my fault, let me fix it. Or I'm just gonna let that person rule the roost because they get mad at me if I don't do what they say. Like I have to be there early and get rained on. Fuck it, let me just be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think looking back, I also remember one of my breakups, I kept saying, I'm bored in my head. And I was trying to explain that to other people, but it was because of that, because there wasn't a lot of spontaneity or novelty. Things became very routine, which in a lot of relationships they do, right? But I never felt any of that like excitement or spark. Hey, let's do something different. Let's mix it up. Let's have another adventure. Like things became very predictable. And I remember saying, I feel trapped. I feel like suffocated. I feel bored. And trying to explain that to other people, they're like, what? Huh? But I couldn't quite express what I was feeling, but I just know that it was like this restlessness. Like I needed something else. I needed to kind of spread my wings and fly and, also maybe have some independence and autonomy at that age. So yeah, I mean, looking back now through this ADHD lens, I feel like all my past relationships make so much sense.
It's really common for people with ADHD to get bored. Um, it's so weird because I was reading this really cool article about how you're either like a hopeless romantic
Mm-hmm.
and you're always in a long-term relationship, or you never settle down and you go through all these people
Mm,
because you're just always constantly bored.
yeah.
Like that can happen really fast. And I can
Mm-hmm.
imagine that that would happen to somebody who like, I don't know, just doesn't have that commitment or doesn't want commitment. I don't know. But they just date and date and date and date and date because like when shit gets like too serious too fast or it's too just monotonous, like you said,
Yeah.
they wig out and they're like, I'm done. I want out of here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if my parents listen, but if they do, this is what you get. Um, there was a time where I really enjoyed just like trying things and
Mm-hmm.
trying new people, and it was a very short-lived era, but I think that my ADHD definitely like made it hard for me to try to build a deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be so weird to keep my attention.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
things had to be very like interesting and intriguing. And I remember even just having like a sexual interest at a young age and having really intense hormones and kind of a desire and curiosity to explore those things, to experience them. So I think there was kind of this internal confliction with just being raised as a girl. I went to a Catholic school, so there were a lot of messages and stigmas that I was trying to sort through, but I also did have these deep feelings and desires. So I think sometimes, especially as ADHD women, we really struggle with like sexual shame,
Oh God,
right?
yes. And both of us, I grew up in the Catholic religion. You went to Catholic
Hmm.
school.
Hmm.
So it's like weird that it's kind of the same, but kind of different, but
Hmm.
still the same fucking shame, right?
Yes, yes.
And you can even call it religious abuse for some people. I'm not saying I was religiously abused. I'm just saying like some people could even call it that, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, like my mother, we did not have open communication about sex. I don't think ever. I think not until I was married.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I remember some awkward conversations surrounding that. And basically the attitude was, yeah, you need to go figure that out. You need to like find other sources to, scratch that itch kind of thing. But there wasn't like any kind of education of, hey, like that's normal to have the desire. Here are some resources if you want to learn how to masturbate or pleasure yourself. If you are interested in having sex, here are some resources or here are some conversations. Here is some information, education. I mean, I think just in our era, yeah, there wasn't a lot of those conversations or education that was provided.
And that again is a generational thing. I think today parents are fucking having that conversation and good for them. And if you're one of those parents, I commend you because I think the worst thing you can do to any kid, whether they have ADHD or not, is make them so confused about sex that they don't know how to use it. Right?
Yeah.
Because you can use it, whether it's for love. It can be an exchange of something. It can be just that feeling, that rush, that excitement. And if you also have kids that happen to have ADHD, be on the spectrum, or have just, I don't know, you probably know more than me, different disorders, sex can be harmful, right? Like it can be totally harmful, but it doesn't have to be shameful.
Yeah. Well, and if kids are miseducated, they're more prone to be a victim. We already know, unfortunately, that children with ADHD have a high rate of being a victim because they don't always read the social cues. They have a strong desire to be loved and accepted. They want to fit in. So they fall into peer pressure or they're taken advantage of. So sexually, if you're not educating your children about what it is and how to navigate it, you're really setting them up for failure. I mean, I've already had discussions with my 7-year-old about it in a very age appropriate way, but she has questions. She wants to know how babies are made and how does it happen? And if two women want to have a baby in a family, how does that work? And so I've already had some deep discussions with my own children because I think it's important to be honest and give them the right information.
Right. And honestly, like I kind of feel like with me and Juliet, when she gets older and we start having these conversations, I'm also going to talk about love. I'm going to talk about how sometimes I do think I might have been too young to be in serious relationships. For me, at least, I don't think I should have been in serious relationships in fucking middle school. I shouldn't have never been in a serious relationship in high school and not even in the beginning of college. Like trying to put a ring on it in the 6th grade. What are we thinking?
Oh my God. Seriously.
Like, what were we doing trying to be like wiped up?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I am thankful that although I had serious relationships in high school, I did have about a year of college life where I was single and free. And I feel like I was able to have those experiences and that freedom and develop some of that autonomy before I met Chris. But, everyone's story is different. But I think we do need that time. We need that time to kind of be on our own, to figure out what we like, who we are, and to casually have those experiences. Because if you just go from one serious relationship to another, sometimes you don't get that breathing room, right?
I think it's like that with friendships.
Yeah.
I think about my friendships in high school. Like, what if I had let go a little more of the one bestie and got to meet a bunch of kids, like on a team or, just a group of kids that hung out for a club. Like, if you have the one friend that you're always with, you don't get to meet those people because jealousy, right? Or you might feel like that you gotta please that person, so you gotta stay committed to just them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes some of this like toxic behavior can come about because it starts that early.
Oh yeah. And so being able to seek that out for yourself and want to have those different experiences and have that balance. So you're not just hyper fixated or overly dependent on one person for your happiness, right?
Like, do you try things out on your own or do you like to try things out with a friend? Like, would you go to a yoga class by yourself or do you have to bring a friend with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point in my age and the work that I've done, I have the preference to bring a friend, right? But if there's not a friend available, I'm totally okay with going on my own, right?
I thought in high school.
Yeah, I mean, that probably would have been 100%, meeting you, like hear someone. No. But I think, obviously we both have done a lot of work and started to lean into that sense of self-love and independence. But yeah, growing up, I mean,
it had to take to our 40s.
Yeah,
I mean, joking. We've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But imagine not even doing it at all in your 30s, wherever in life. Like that work is so important. Imagine if we did the work in our 20s.
Yeah.
Or we got to have a little bit of it in our 16 era, right? Like how much could we have progressed with those feelings and emotions?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? And so kind of seeking that in other people or seeking that in these relationships because it gave us a sense of safety or security or worthiness, but then maybe that holds you back on developing that internally, right? Kind
Yeah.
of that intrinsic feeling. So, sometimes you do end up learning that in hindsight and having to develop it later on in life, but better late than never, right?
I think they should put this in elementary. That's my
Yes.
opinion. Like, let's get rid of like PE.
Yes.
Not in this country. No, we can keep PE, but it should also be like a little bit of mental health. Like we can
Oh,
get rid
yeah.
of math, like fuck math.
Yeah.
Or
I mean,
history even. Like you can learn that later. Like you
yeah.
don't need to know about wars in like the kindergarten times.
Hmm.
And that's when you should be learning this.
Yeah.
We were having these feelings at kindergarten
Hmm.
age,
Hmm.
not later in life. Like that's crazy. Like that, we need to get a handle on that. If all kids are starting to feel that way,
Yeah.
especially kids with ADHD, I think,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, and think about it. There's so much education on emotions early on. Like both my girls, when they're in preschool and kindergarten, they talk about emotions. They have the feelings wheel, happy, sad, angry. They talk about love in a sense of like parental love or family, but they don't talk about like romance and relationships and like that type of love and connection until way later on. And those feelings can develop so early, right? Like, what is the difference between loving your parents and maybe having a crush or loving a partner when you get older?
Mhm.
Like, when did they learn about that?
I don't know. Do you learn it earlier on if you have ADHD? Do neurotypical people learn that later?
Well, and that's the thing. I think so much of it can also be missed when you have ADHD or exaggerated, right? So you might have a skewed perception of what love is or what a relationship should be, or maybe that's more natural for neurotypicals to kind of pick up on that.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, everything we do can be kind of extreme or amplified. So, of course, we're going to be big feelers, big lovers. We're going to really experience those things more intensely. So, we need some more support and education around it.
It's hard to find that though, like when you just don't know and you're not diagnosed. Um, Again, like I feel like after getting the diagnosis, if you just get a diagnosis and you don't follow up with research and support, then you still won't get it, right? Like me.
Mhm.
But after realizing now that people didn't have a lot of research under their thinking cups,
Mhm.
people would just give you this diagnosis and like let you run with it, and then there's no processing. Now that I've been able to process a lot of this and do the research and get the support, I'm realizing like, damn, fuck.
It's hard. It's bittersweet because it's empowering and it's enlightening to be like, oh, damn. So now my whole life makes sense. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of grief, regret, loss, like some of that regret orientation where you kind of replay your life now with this information. But like you and I talked about, it's important to understand that you only know what you know when you know it, and you can't hold that against your past self,
No,
right?
no. I think if anything, you can create a podcast
Yeah.
and just try to put that information out there once you learn it and help
Mhm.
others, because that's really what the whole thing of it is. And that's the reason why I think we both are so like amped up about this podcast.
Mhm.
We're inspired. I think since making this podcast, I've had so many of my friends, clients, people I don't even know reaching out and saying like, wow, like this is really hitting home and this is making me understand. And I've actually been thinking about it more. And that's the awareness that I think I'm hoping for that we hear, right?
Fuck yeah. I mean, our goal is to share our stories and experiences so that people can relate to it, they can learn from it. And at the end of the day, after this episode, in summary, although we've been through all this heartache and all these growing pains, we both have ended up in very happy partnerships. And so I know that we're going to dive into that next time
Yeah.
to,
Oh my God.
right? Talk about what actually does work and how we have figured out where we function in a relationship with
Yeah.
ADHD.
And you guys, we're going to have our partners here with us.
Whoop, whoop.
I think it's important to, interview some new guests and get their intake, but also those guests being people that actually are directly affected by our ADHD.
Yes, I think it's going to be so amazing to have them and just their own perspective too on what it's been like to be in a relationship with us and how our ADHD shows up. And, now that they're understanding our diagnosis, what they have done differently, what we've done differently to make the relationship effective.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Yes, it's going to be juicy.
Part 2 is coming. I really hope that this conversation definitely inspired you guys. If you have any questions, if you ever just want to reach out, let us know what you're thinking. We're always here for you. And we're just trying to build a community, make the world more aware.
Yes. So thank you so much for all your support. Thanks for joining us and stay tuned for the next episode, guys.